My name's Michelle, as John said. I'm from the University of Cambridge, and the topic I've chosen to talk about is supercurriculars and wider reading. So basically, the reason I picked this topic is because I often get asked by students, what can I do to make my application stand out? I'm thinking of applying to this university for this course, and I just don't really know what to write about in my personal statement. So hopefully this presentation will give you some ideas of what sorts of things universities are looking for in the sorts of students who are applying. And the best way to stand out is to engage in this supercurricular learning and then tell us all about all the wonderful things that you have done. So very quickly then, what are supercurriculars? Many of you might have heard the term kind of extracurriculars before, and supercurricular is something that's a little bit different. So supercurriculars, when you're engaging in academic work, which can be reading, but it could equally be watching a documentary, or it could be doing your own research project. But it's important that you're doing it in your own time. So not the sorts of things that you're doing as part of your schoolwork, but kind of things that you're doing at home or outside of school, which just show that you're going beyond what you're being taught at school. So it's not the same as extracurricular, which could be things like playing sports. I've got an image there of Quidditch, which is a popular university sport. So as Mandeep spoke about earlier, there's so many opportunities to get involved in things when you go to university. But yeah, sorry, I'm going off topic now, but these are kind of considered extracurricular because they're not related to the course or the subject that you want to study at university. That being said, some things that might be supercurricular for one person might be extracurricular for another. So for example, if you were applying to study music, then playing in an orchestra would be supercurricular for you because it's related to the course that you want to do. Whereas if you're applying to do law, for example, then maybe playing in an orchestra isn't as relevant to studying law. So why is it important to do a bit of supercurricular? Well, the first thing I think is that it's really helpful for helping you to choose your university course, because one of the things that's really great about university is that there are loads of courses out there, many of which you might not really have had much experience of before. So, courses like, economics or psychology or medicine or engineering, there's lots of different subjects which you might not have come across before at school. And if you're not really sure what they are and what they would involve, then doing a bit of supercurricular activity in that subject will give you an idea of whether it's actually something that you would really enjoy when you go to university. Equally, you might think that you want to study a particular course, but then you read a book about it or read an article about it, and actually you found it was kind of boring and you weren't that interested in it. And that might give you a sense that actually maybe that course isn't suitable for you. The next thing it helps you to do is to prepare you for university and for independent learning. So one of the ways in which university is quite different to what you're used to at school is there's a lot more scope to kind of do your own thing and choose the kind of topics you want to focus on. So rather than at school where your teacher will give you, this is the book that we're studying, these are the questions you're going to answer, here's the essay you're going to write. At university, you're probably more likely to go to a lecture on a given topic, and then you go away and read a bit more on your own and maybe come up with your own essay question, for example, your own project to take. So there's a lot more independence, a lot more choice when it comes to university learning. So if you're doing supercurricular, which is stuff you're doing outside of school, then obviously that gives you a lot of freedom and scope to choose, to look into topics that are really interesting to you. Doing supercurriculars as well will help you to demonstrate your interest in your chosen subject. And that's really important because universities, when they look at your application, they want to know that actually you thought about the course that you've applied to and it is something that you would be interested in and can stick with for the next 3 to 6 years potentially. So just being able to demonstrate some concrete examples of where you've engaged with that subject before will help give admissions tutors at universities a sense that you know what you're getting into basically. So how do you do that? You would maybe write about them in your personal statement. And if you're applying for a course where there are interviews, you might want to talk about them at interviews, or you might get asked about them there as well. And finally, I think in general, doing some supercurricular activity really helps you to develop some transferable skills, which are obviously useful for applying to university and going to university, but just useful in life in general as well. So, developing your skills of critical thinking is, generally helpful no matter where you are. So what are some examples of supercurriculars? So the first thing to say is that there's no right or wrong way to go about supercurricular activity, because there's so many different things that you could engage with. So it could be reading books, it could be wider reading. Often people talk about wider reading as a great way to get involved, but it doesn't necessarily mean you have to read a whole book. You could potentially read just a few chapters from a book, or looking for shorter things to read, such as journal articles. If you're not as engaged by kind of written text, then you could think about watching documentaries and films instead, or potentially other videos online. If you go on YouTube, for example, there'll be lots of recorded lectures that you can listen to, or things like TED Talks on lots of different academic topics. If you're a fan of podcasts or radio shows, that can be a really good way to engage in supercurricular as well. I really like podcasts because you can go on your daily commute, or if you're going for your socially distanced walk at the moment, you can put on a podcast and learn something cool whilst enjoying the outside as well. So they're really good to have on just in the background, and you can learn lots of things through those as well. There's also kind of more hands-on ways you could get some supercurricular activity in. For example, lots of universities host competitions where you can enter things like essays or take photos of work that you've done. There could even be social media competitions, but as long as you're kind of engaged in an academic activity, then that's what we're looking for. You could also go to visit museums when they reopen, but equally lots of museums have online websites where they kind of digitize their archives and put lots of great information online as well. And of course, other educational websites will have things that you can look at as well. If you're more hands-on, then actually, supercurricular could be doing your own project in your own time outside of school. So it could be something like building or modeling something physical, or even just building with Lego. Or it could be, for example, doing some coding in your spare time if you're interested in studying computer science. Lots of ways that you could do your own work and kind of engage in an activity at home. So just for a few more kind of concrete examples, I just have this slide up here of some examples of places you could go to find some supercurricular activities. And this is going to really depend on what subject you're interested in and the course you're looking to apply to. So for example, if you want to apply for a science course, then a good way to engage in supercurricular might be reading a scientific article in something like New Scientist, or the British Medical Journal, or Nature magazine. There's lots of things you can find online, or equally you could purchase a subscription. Many schools will also have free kind of resources like this, or you might be able to get them in your library, so you don't even have to pay. There's also, as I mentioned, podcasts. If you go onto iTunes U, there's loads of educational podcasts on there, as well as on BBC Radio 4. Some of your parents might listen to those shows, but they are honestly really good for people looking to apply to university as well. So how can you find things to do? Well, one of the easiest ways is just to search online. So if you're looking to apply for a certain course, let's say it's economics, just search, economics supercurricular and see what comes up. But one search tool that I would really recommend is Google Scholar, because what that does is that it looks specifically for academic articles that have been published in academic kind of journals and publications. So you know that there's kind of a level of reputation there, and it's not just kind of a random person's internet website. So if you go on Google Scholar and you search for a particular topic that you're interested in, I don't know, let's say you're going to apply for geography and you're really interested in deforestation, you could just search that and find all kinds of different articles and research on that topic. You could also check university websites, who often post reading lists for prospective students, as well as potentially for students on their course. So for example, if you look at a university website and find their first year reading list, that might give you a few things that you could read right now, which will get you ahead of the curve and be able to demonstrate that you actually really would enjoy this course. Also consider how you can get things for free or very cheaply. So libraries are a really great resource. I know obviously a lot of them are closed at the moment, but lots of them will have online resources that you can access or online subscriptions to journals. So do have a look at what's available to you. And also consider, what's local to you, what's around where you live. There might be a great museum or really good workshop opportunities. There might be opportunities to do some work experience. So if you're applying for a course where it's quite vocational, for example, medicine, then if you can get some work experience, obviously once, COVID has passed, then that would be a good way to engage in supercurricular as well. But when you're looking for that supercurricular activity, I've got some tips here to kind of help you to look for things, because there is so much out there. And actually, you don't need to spend loads and loads of time on these things. In fact, it's better to probably spend a little bit of time on a few things that are really interesting to you than to spend lots of time trying to plow through things that aren't particularly interested. So, think about the format that would engage you. If you enjoy watching videos, for example, then look for videos. If you prefer things in a written format, then read books. Don't worry too much about what you think might look good in your application or what might look good to universities, because what they care more about is that you've explored your own interests, whatever they may be. And just to give an example of that, I brought a little prop because I found in my bookshelf an example of some supercurricular reading that I did when I was in year 12. And I ended up studying philosophy, and basically I had not studied that subject before at school. And I really didn't know what it was about, but I found this book. I don't know if you can see or read that, but it's called Batman and Philosophy, because I was a big comic book nerd. I really liked the Batman films when they came out, the Christopher Nolan ones, and I also read lots of graphic novels in the Batman universe. And this book just really caught my attention because it introduced lots of academic content in a very digestible and entertaining way. And I actually wrote about this on my personal statement. I can't imagine any academic at a university would think, wow, Batman, that's a really academic topic. But it doesn't matter because it's still engaging in something supercurricular. It introduced these concepts to me in a really easy to think about way. And actually there was lots of good learning that I did on this. It talks about, ethics and morality, all kinds of philosophical concepts. So that's what I mean by don't worry about what might look good, and just think more about actually what are your interests and what areas do you really care about and would be interested in. The last thing though to consider is make sure it's a reputable source. And I kind of mean that in quite a general way. This book is written by academic philosophers, but it's not the most serious of texts, and that's fine. But just make sure that when you're kind of reading things to have a critical eye about it, and, just check that what you're reading is, factual, is evidence-based, that it's kind of generally accepted in the academic content. So what should you do whilst you're engaging in this supercurricular activity? Well, one of the things is, bear in mind that you're going to be applying to university possibly next year or the following year. And it could be a long time between when you apply and when you've actually done this supercurricular activity. So, do keep a record of it. Write down the names of books that you've read, maybe write down a few notes at the same time, just so that when it comes to then, talking about it in your personal statement, you can very easily refer back to it. Have a think about how you're engaging in that content as well, because one of the things with supercurricular activity is that it's not just about memorizing lots of facts or learning about a new topic, but actually engaging with it beyond that and going deeper. Thinking about if you've done an activity, how did you go about solving that problem? What were the challenges you found? How did you engage with it? What did you think about it? Did you agree or disagree? These are all things that universities really love to see and hear about from applicants, because it shows that you've gone a bit deeper and you're not just taking everything at face value. And then have a think about how you could follow up with more things that interest you. So if you read an article that's kind of an introduction to a topic and it really, sparked your interest in it, then maybe have a look at where else you could find more information, maybe contrasting viewpoints, maybe more recent research. It could be anything, but actually, doing a deep dive on a given topic is often better than doing lots of very shallow dives into lots of different topics. So how do you demonstrate this to universities? I've mentioned personal statements quite a few times in this this presentation, and that's probably the key way that you're going to be able to demonstrate it to the universities. So when you do your supercurricular activities, you're going to want to talk about having done it in your personal statement. So go into detail about what it is that you did exactly, you know, explain what you learned, how did you go about it, what kind of thoughts did you have about it, and you know, what kind of your journey was through that academic content. It's always better to choose a few rather than many. So as I said, you know, doing a deep dive on a few topics is generally better than doing lots. But at the beginning, it's totally okay to explore lots of different kinds of things until you kind of get a better sense on what it is that you find really interesting. And as I said, you know, focus on the things you found interesting, not the ones that you did just because you thought someone would think you sound really clever. Because bear in mind that, for example, you might be asked about it if you go to interview. And if it's something that you didn't really find very interesting, then it's going to be a lot harder to talk about and a lot harder to demonstrate your enthusiasm. And then if you do go and apply for a course where there is an interview, so for example, in medicine, lots of courses will do interviews. If you're applying for Oxford or Cambridge, there'll be interviews for all of our courses. Just remind yourself of what kind of supercurriculars you've done, because it will give you some confidence because you have things to talk about, but equally they could ask you questions about things you've mentioned in your personal statement. So that's it from me. Hopefully that gives you kind of a good introduction to supercurricular activities, and just, you know, goes to show how many different things you could do right now. Equally, don't go mad about trying to fit in loads and loads of supercurriculars. As I said, be guided by your interests. Hopefully these are things that you really enjoy doing anyway, so it won't feel too much like extra work. So thanks very much for listening.